Most people are not bad at photography. They are just doing it wrong without realizing it. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but it's the truth. Because if your photos consistently look average, it's not your camera, it's not your lens, and it's definitely not bad luck. It's your decision making. It's the small decisions you make without thinking, the tiny choices you repeat every single time you raise your camera, without ever questioning them. And today I'm going to fix that. Not with gear, not with editing tricks, not with some secret preset, but with how you think before you take a photo. Because once you change how you think, everything else starts to change automatically. The way you see changes, the way you frame changes, the way you choose changes, and that changes everything. Let's get into it. Before we start, I want you to be honest with yourself. Not surface level honest. I mean genuinely honest. Have you ever taken a photo that looked amazing in real life? The light felt perfect. The moment felt emotional. Everything felt cinematic and worth capturing. But when you checked it on your phone, it looked completely disappointing, flat, lifeless, messy, confusing. Like the feeling just disappeared somewhere between your eyes and your camera. Yeah, that moment is where most people start blaming everything except themselves. They blame lighting, they blame conditions, they blame the camera, they blame the lens. Some people even blame bad timing, like somehow the moment betrayed them. But let me tell you something uncomfortable. None of that is the real issue, not even close. The real issue is this. You are trying to capture everything you see, everything that feels interesting, everything that feels important. And photography does not work like that at all. Photography is not about copying reality. It is about choosing what reality should look like. It is about deciding what deserves attention and what does not. And most people are terrible at choosing. They hesitate. They include too much. They are afraid to leave things out. They think more is safer. And that is exactly why their photos feel average, forgettable, and unfocused. So let's fix that. Idea 1. Visual subtraction. Let's start with the most important idea in this entire video. Visual subtraction. Now I know that sounds boring, like something a teacher says right before everyone starts checking their phone. But this one idea is probably the difference between your photos being ignored or being saved, skipped, or remembered. Most beginners think photography is about adding things, more objects, more detail, more background, more layers, more interesting stuff, more everything, all at once. And that is exactly why their photos look messy and overwhelming. Because here is the truth. The more things you put in a frame, the less anything matters. Attention gets diluted, focus disappears, nothing stands out, everything competes, and when everything competes, everything loses. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you are standing in a busy city street, cars moving in every direction, people walking past you, neon signs flashing, reflections everywhere, noise everywhere, movement everywhere. It feels alive, it feels intense, it feels cinematic. Now you take out your phone and try to capture it all. What happens? You don't get a photo, you get chaos, a flat, overwhelming image with no clear subject, no clear intention, and no clear story. And then you wonder why it doesn't look like what you saw. Here is something most people don't understand. Your eyes are not a camera. Your brain is constantly filtering reality. It removes noise automatically. It prioritizes what matters without asking you. It simplifies the world for you. Your phone does not do that. Your camera does not do that. So when you try to capture everything, you are basically dumping raw, unfiltered chaos into a frame and expecting it to look meaningful. It won't. Now let's fix that. Instead of asking, what can I include? Ask this, what is not important here? That one question changes everything. It forces you to think. It forces you to decide. It forces you to simplify. Let's go back to the street. Now instead of capturing everything, you choose one subject, just one. A person walking alone under a streetlight. That's it. Everything else immediately drops in importance. The cars become blur, the background becomes atmosphere, the chaos becomes silence, the noise becomes texture, and suddenly the viewer knows exactly where to look. No confusion, no hesitation. That is visual subtraction. Now let me push this further. Subtraction is not just removing objects, it is removing competition. Because if two things compete for attention, both lose. If three things compete, the image collapses. If everything competes, nothing survives. So your job is not to show more. Your job is to decide what deserves attention and eliminate everything else that fights it. Now let's go deeper. Imagine a mountain landscape. Most people try to capture everything: sky, clouds, mountains, trees, valleys, colors, light rays, textures, everything in one frame. And then they wonder why it feels flat, like something you scroll past in half a second, because there is no focus, no hierarchy, no intention. Now instead, you choose one thing: a single tree on the edge of a cliff, a cabin hidden in fog, a lone figure standing in the distance. Now the image suddenly feels intentional. It feels controlled. It feels designed, because you stopped recording reality and started designing attention. Now let me stop you here for a second, because this is where most people misunderstand photography. They think less content means boring photos. They think removing things makes the image weaker. But it is actually the opposite. Less content forces meaning, because the viewer is no longer told everything. They are forced to interpret, to fill in the gaps, to engage with the image. And interpretation is what creates emotional value. That is why minimal images feel expensive, not because they are simple, but because they are controlled. Every element is intentional. Nothing is random. Nothing is accidental. Idea 2. Order and alignment. Now let's talk about something even more underrated: order and alignment. This is the reason your photos don't feel professional. Even when everything else seems fine on the surface, even if your subject is good, even if your lighting is decent, even if your moment is strong, if the structure is wrong, everything feels wrong. Your brain is extremely sensitive to alignment. Even if you don't notice it consciously, you feel it immediately. If something is slightly tilted, it feels off. If lines don't match, it feels unstable. If balance is wrong, it feels uncomfortable in a subtle but undeniable way. Now here's something interesting. Many beginners think tilted photos look artistic, but most of the time they don't. They just look like mistakes, like something wasn't corrected. There is a difference between intention and accident, and viewers can feel that difference instantly, even if they can't explain it. Now let's go deeper. Alignment is not just about straight horizons, it is about visual stability. For example, a person standing in front of a building. If everything behind them is chaotic, misaligned, and inconsistent, the image feels unstable and unintentional. But if you align the subject with architectural lines, windows, edges, verticals, the image suddenly feels structured. It feels balanced. It feels designed. That is alignment. That is structure. That is control. Idea 3. Visual guidance. Now we reach the most important idea: visual guidance. And this is where most people completely lose control without realizing it. Every photo has hierarchy. Something is seen first, something is seen second, something is ignored completely. If you don't control this, randomness will. And randomness is a terrible photographer. It always picks the wrong thing, usually the brightest thing, or the biggest thing, or the most distracting thing, not the most meaningful thing, not the subject you actually cared about when you pressed the shutter. So your job is simple: decide the subject. Everything else supports it. Nothing competes with it. Let me show you: street scene, person, car, signs, lights, movement everywhere. If you do nothing, viewer attention becomes random. Their eyes jump around with no direction, no purpose, no structure. Now you take control. You use light to highlight the subject. You use contrast to separate it. You use framing to isolate it. You reduce distractions. You darken what doesn't matter. You simplify what competes. And now, the viewer looks exactly where you want, exactly when you want. That is visual guidance. That is control. That is photography. Now let's combine everything. Visual subtraction removes noise. Order and alignment creates structure. Visual guidance creates meaning. And when you combine all three, your photography changes completely, not slightly, completely. Final truth, you are not bad at photography. You are just doing too much at once, trying to include everything, trying to capture everything, trying not to miss anything. And that is exactly why your photos feel messy and unfocused. Once you learn to simplify, everything becomes obvious, decisions become easier, frames become cleaner, results become stronger. Because photography is not about capturing reality, it is about controlling attention. And once you understand that, you stop taking photos and start making decisions, real decisions, intentional decisions, the kind of decisions that separate average from memorable. I'm Mr. Simple. See you next time. Peace.